So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to Prizm. This is our fourth panel for the day. I have the distinct pleasure of speaking with, being in conversation with Jumaane N'namdi and George N'namdi. And between the two of them, there's at least 45 to 50 years of work in the arts and gallery management, and they've collectively worked with several artists, including Rashid Johnson, Jack Whitten, some of the important names in the African and African Diaspora arts canon. And Jumaane has a space here, or two spaces here, one in Wynwood, another in Little Haiti. And his father, George N'namdi, has a number of spaces in Detroit and plays an integral role in the artistic development and urban development of spaces in Detroit. So I will begin the conversation with asking George about his work in Detroit and his extensive collection. What inspires the work that you do, and what made you even want to begin this journey of art collecting and developing communities around the arts?
Well, first, thank you for having me here, and the Prizm Art Fair. I really have enjoying it, both the organization and the quality of work that you present. So I'm very honored to be able to participate in it. Well, believe it or not, I'm a product of the 60s. Okay, and in the 60s, most political activities were both political and cultural in terms of organizations. So in college, when we had like the black student unions or any other student unions, they always had a cultural part of it. And I ended up being the minister of culture and everything. So in 1968, that's when I purchased my first piece of art. Now, I paid $125 for about 3 or 4 pieces. And at the time, everybody thought that was crazy. But just to put that in perspective, tuition was $150 a quarter. And I was on student loan for that. Okay, so that's his perspective. But I did start collecting then. I ultimately became a psychologist, and part of opening the gallery, although I was always connected in terms of purchasing art and collecting art, but not necessarily knowing what I was collecting. It just felt important for me. But as a psychologist, I thought that I saw art as being a connector for particularly the African American community. So I really opened the first gallery to represent. My granddaughter's up here. I opened the first gallery in terms of like a community service project. A lot of the arts now are talking about art in community, but that was always my mission from the beginning in terms of opening the gallery. I did open the gallery in 1981 in Detroit, Michigan. And our first exhibition was all New York artists, and they were all abstract. That was a major, major statement at that time, because many people who came, they would always say, I thought you was going to have an African American gallery. And I would say everybody in here is African American. But it ended up growing. Detroit ultimately became a very a mecca for abstract artists and abstract art that they would do. So that's probably part of what I've done. And then on the way, I developed different things. I'll let you ask your question.
And because this is very clearly a legacy building lineage that you have between you and your son, what is it about what your father was doing in the arts? Because, kids don't necessarily decide to do what their parents are doing. But you very keenly decided that what your dad was doing was something that you also wanted to put into practice yourself. So what was it about what your father was doing that was intriguing to you and made you want to continue that legacy?
Well, for me, I gotta say, at first I thought I was gonna be a teacher, okay? Because my mother had also started a school back in '78, so K through 8th grade, and I said, I'm gonna graduate from Morehouse and I'm gonna be a teacher. But I did a lot of interning at different elementary schools, and I realized I was more of a friend to the kid than a teacher, and they weren't really listening, and I was like, this is not gonna work. And it was interesting too, because I would always work in summer camps while I was in college. And I would sell art to the directors of the camps. I never forget selling them a Jacob Lawrence, and they were so excited. They're giving me a check for a Jacob Lawrence, then they're like giving me another check for $4 an hour. And it was cool because it was never about the money with Jacob Lawrence, but it was the idea that they really, appreciated the art. And I liked that transaction of helping someone collect art. And my parents always say, I don't even remember doing this, but my mother probably wrote it. But in my graduation book, it said, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm moving to Chicago to work at George and Jumaane N'namdi Gallery. I don't remember writing that because I was just trying to graduate. I didn't even know I was in that book, okay?
Right.
I thought I'm still like, I want to see this. But and part of it is too, I think family, culture, legacy is really important. Like I always say, like one thing I always say, don't reinvent the wheel, just put rims on it.
Right.
I think we keep starting over generation after generation, and it was important to me just to continue something our family has done. And that's really why I was going to be a teacher as well. Like, okay, we got to stay in the school, keep it going. Because I feel like as a culture, we start over. Everybody can talk about someone in their family, oh yeah, well, he used to make shoes. And then it's like, man, if you would have kept making shoes, maybe your family would be Nike. Who knows? But I didn't want to start over. I want just to build it up. It just so happens that I love art, and I love business, and I love promoting, because those are all the things I did. But the main thing, and I love culture, so it never was really like I'm going to get this job. It was more so like, let's just keep it going. And he opened a gallery in Chicago in '96. And so in '97, when I graduated, I just moved straight to Chicago, and I ran that gallery. I was so nervous. I was there. I mean, people don't even believe how nervous I am, or was.
Yeah, because you wear very good poker face, Jumaane.
No, but selling art was really hard for me because I grew up around it. I appreciate it, and I want everybody to love it like I did. But to actually get someone to buy a piece was really tough.
Sure.
So it wasn't until I bought a piece that I could see, so some Ed Clark prints. I said, okay, I'm going to buy these Ed Clark prints.
Right.
And then if I do that, then I can know what you're really feeling when I say it's only $30,000.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because I used to say it like it was no big deal. Like, what? Everybody has $30,000.
Right.
Like, but everybody doesn't have $30,000.
So that's a part of your strategy. Your strategy is if I can do it, then you can encourage other
Yeah,
people
just
to
because I had it, but I wasn't the collector.
Okay.
My parents had the art.
Sure.
So it was around me. But I had to really see what it felt like to commit and to put on, like my father says, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Right.
Where does that fit? And as I was collecting, I realized, okay, it's rising up in terms of what I want to do with my money. Maybe I can share this and this feeling with other people and help them build collections.
Right.
So really it was about just being in the family business and keeping something going, to the next stage.
So clearly you all have similar interests, and you're both major collectors, you both sell work, but where does your practices differ? How is your gallery practice different from your father's gallery practice?
Well, it started off with me just having a computer. Y'all don't know how hard it was to get a computer. Okay? Just a computer. I just handwrite that thing and send it off. I'm like, no, they got email now. Please let me do it. But I would say this, and he always looks. He may look. I'm not gonna look at him while I'm saying this stuff because he's gonna look funny at me on his own, and then y'all can just But I always say I have a better eye than he does. But that's not bad for him. That's really good for him because I hope my daughter has a better eye than me. Okay, the whole thing is growth because see, he learned it. I just grew up in it. She's gonna see stuff even bigger than me because she's just gonna just keep on being a part of the arts. So then I'm joking, but I'm serious. I think what's different is that I think the natural just growing up around the arts and being like the artist he had me. I mean, he's played hide and seek behind a Richard Hunt. So I started that at a young age, at 5. So the way I look at art is going to be different than someone who started looking at art in college. And not only did he look at art in college, the art I was around were the master artists. So you just have a whole different kind of relationship, and the way you see things. You don't even know you don't even know why you can tell something's very interesting because it's like that's all I know.
It's a part of it. It's like second nature to you.
I don't know the other way.
Right.
It was like I didn't have to relearn something or learn something. It's just kind of innate.
Yeah.
Like this one here.
Right. And how do you feel about it, George? In terms of how your work is different from Jumane's? Do you have anything to add to that?
Well, of course, I don't know about having a better eye, but I'm gonna let him have it, because my eyes are tired. This has been 37 years, so now I announce it now. So I only have 3 more. Then he would have it all. He and his sister, but art gallery. Not art. But what I would do it this way. What I'm most proud of with Jumaane, one is his eye, and we have a very similar sensibility. I think he's more in tune with the younger artists today, kind of understandably so. I mean, because he can go hang out with y'all. I can't do that. I'm sorry. We can talk a little bit, but I'm not hanging out. Right? So it's like this. But I think that is really one of the most significant things. He's more in tune with what's happening today. So I really kind of take his lead on today. But there's a couple of things I like to just mention because he's had influence in terms of what we did as a gallery. That's kind of very important. In Detroit, at one time in Detroit, one of the suburbs called Birmingham had all the galleries, had about 35 galleries in it. And I was downtown Detroit, damn near by myself as a gallery. And one day, he and I was riding out there and I saw a building and I said, I think that'll work good as a gallery. I think that worked well as a gallery, okay? But it was what we call 14 mile. In Detroit, we have mile rules, so it's 14 mile. But on the south side of 14 mile is Royal Oak, north side is Birmingham. And I said, look at that church is only 4,000 square feet. I could have a gallery, then a little cafe with it, but all that. What did he say? He says, but it's in Royal Oak. Why would you come this close to Birmingham and not cross the street? Because Birmingham was the address you got to have, right? And so I said, good point. Then we continued to ride. We rode in Birmingham, and we found the space in Birmingham. And this space, I'm going to have to put this in perspective. My rent at the time in Detroit was $750. Birmingham rent in 1989 was $3,000. Now, I want you to think about that. $3,000, that's a lot now to be paying for rent, right? We're talking about 30 years ago, $3,000. Now, I look back on it and I just shiver because I don't know how I did that. But he talked me into that. Also, that $750 in Detroit, I was 4 months behind in the rent. So, so I didn't know how he was going to do it. So that's one thing he helped in motivating and make me get that space. The other thing where I knew he would make a very great dealer is I had left him in the gallery, and a gentleman came in and was looking at an Ed Clark. And he said, someone came in and was looking at an Ed Clark, but he kept laughing. I said, well, what did you say to him? He said, well, it says $8,000. I said, no, how did you say it? He said, I told him, now he's like 13 or 12 or 13. I told him that it was only $8,000. Okay, now we're talking about 25 years ago, right? Or maybe even 30 then still. But when he said that to, you can imagine a 12-year-old even telling you now $8,000, you'd be like, oh, get out of here, kid, right? But so the person laughs. I knew he had no fear of the prices because he grew up with those prices. And those are some of the symbols. And I think in terms of being a dealer, that was some of the beginning, is that attitude that he had in terms of the work. And also the eye. His eye is, he does have a great eye. But it cost me a lot of money in his art programs and Morehouse tuition, all that stuff. So it's like, I paid for it, but anyway, we do believe in the legacy, but I do say I credit him with doing a lot of undercover motivational things that helped me go to the other side. By the way, we did go to Birmingham. I did pay the $3,000 a month. It turned into $4,800 a month before I left 13 years later, and now we are in Detroit. So we were out there for 13 years, and we chose to leave to help go back to Detroit and start the Renaissance there.
And as we mentioned earlier, you both have extensive collections. So are there any particular works in your collections that you feel you'd like to talk about because they have a personal narrative for you and your son?
Well, I'd maybe like to just go through some slides of the collection. Absolutely. I don't have personal pieces, just like I don't have favorite children. They're all my children. He's my favorite only son. Okay? Then I got a favorite older daughter and a favorite younger daughter. So, here we go. Oh, you got it.
Yeah, so we got it up here
That's
for you.
That's by Charles Alston. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to run through the names of the artists so you can ask me questions. Emmanuel Araújo, he's a sculptor from Brazil. He was the director of the Contemporary Art Museum in Sao Paulo. That's Romare Bearden. Chikaya Booker out of Newark and Allentown, yes, in New York. That's Chikaya Booker also. That's Frank Bowling, who resides in London, has a studio in Brooklyn, and originally from Guyana, South America. That's really a horizontal piece, and that's Carol Ann Carter. Nanette Carter. Ed Clark. Ed Clark, just by the way, was one of the first artists to go beyond the frame, that rectangle or square. He did it in 1956, and the piece that he did, that piece was lost in a shipment coming from Europe. But in 1957, he had a second piece by that was a shape painting, and that's in the Art Institute of Chicago.
And then also to add to that, Ed Clark's piece, I think, is a part of Pam's permanent collection, correct? Yeah.
And that's Robert Colescott. That's Buford Delaney. Herbert Gentry. Herbert Gentry again. Sam Gilliam. Richard Hunt. Richard Hunt. Bill Hudson. Rashid Johnson. That's HNIC. Anybody know what that means? Head of N'namdi in charge. Okay, if you have to ask. Okay. This is the first piece. This is Diane Phyllis Jones. This is the first piece I bought in 1968. That's one of the pieces of the $125. And it was just sitting around the house collecting dirt, or dust, excuse me. And that piece, when I got it, I said, let me just get this clean and see what it looks like. I got it clean, and then when I saw it, I says, now, that's a nice piece. Now, see, that shows you that you have an eye. Okay? Okay, that's Artist Lane.
Funny story about this piece. You know, we go to Artist Lane studio in California. We're just hanging out. I'm a kid. And that's it. We leave. I come back home. This painting's on the wall. And then one day, my father says, hey, you know that's your mama, right? The time we were at the studio, my mother was in the back getting painted. So it just always was funny that Mama, get out of there.
That's Jacob Lawrence. Romare Bearden and Jacob Lawrence, I was kind of late to the party, so I have just important graphics by them. Okay.
I have a Romare Bearden collage. That gives you an idea how we go to, the eye thing.
Norman Lewis, Morning. This is Al Loving. This is a 1960s piece, and Al Loving was from Detroit, and very few people will remember him as a figurative painter. Now that's Al Loving. That's how a lot of people will remember him. Richard Mayhew. That's Charles McGee. He's one of the important artists in Detroit. That's Allie McGee, no relations to Charles. Tyrone Mitchell. Vicente Pimentel, who resides in Paris, originally from the Dominican Republic. Howardina Pindell. Those two Howardina Pindell is one of my the depression hotspots, because they just, I just love them. But go ahead, next one. Betty Saar. Raymond Saunders. John Scott. Charles Searles. Vincent Smith. Bob Thompson. Jack Whitten. Bernard Williams. I did. William T. Williams. Yeah. George and Carmen N'namdi. That's just a part of the collection. I would say that is about maybe 20%. Okay.
Just 20%. And so, what is the long-term plan for the N'namdi story? Like, what are some of your goals and your visions for the future?
Well, as I said, 3 more years, but I'm really hoping to be able to have some institutions to acquire most of the collection, and possibly keep or donate the remainder. That's what I have, and pass something on to the next generation. Nataki here.
Nataki.
Okay.
Do you want to add anything to that, Jay?
Well, I mean, part of it is it's honestly what I would like to have some kind of museum one day. Mm-hmm. I mean, am I breaking any ground now? Yeah. Well, technically I am, but not for that. For the gallery, because I'm moving my gallery to Little Haiti. But me and my wife always talk about one day on that plot of land building something where we can have a family collection in there that can, be seen and shown. And I'm not selling art, I'm just living and.
The N'namdi family collection.
Yeah, that's really what I would like, something like that.
That would be great.
Yeah.
That would be great. That would be great for Miami.
Yeah, cool. Just have something cool.
So if anybody has any questions, we're happy to open up so you can ask these two amazing gentlemen questions about their work. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm just curious for both your father and you about the fact that many black people's perception of art, when he talked about the gallery, that when people went into it, they didn't automatically see what they thought was a embrace of the black image. How do you feel about that kind of disconnect, that people don't see the cultural impact of abstraction in the African American community, even though in Africa abstraction is, you see in textiles, you see it in the sculptures? Why do you feel there's this kind of prejudice with black people, as the only black art is something that distinctly shows a black face?
Well, I mean, yeah, you hear that all the time, and well, you did more so in the past, but that's okay, because the whole point was education, and that's really why you did it, because you want to show people their culture. It's kind of like introducing someone to music and saying, I'm gonna have jazz. Some kid today may say, what is that? And that's okay. You're not gonna introduce them straight to music just through, say, hip hop, which is fine, but you want them to develop an ear for different sounds and sounds that come from your culture. So it never bothered me. It was more so a chance to educate. And because, see, first of all, a lot of people started collecting art, not necessarily, they enjoyed art, they appreciate art, but there are a lot of the collectors I know, they were starting their collection because they wanted to have black faces on their wall so they can see something and they can feel like, I'm really supporting this, or it reminds me of growing up here, or what it might be. So once I could show them, say, okay, that's fine, but now let's go to, how do you feel? Let's get your energy. Then they see an Ed Clark and they're like, ooh, I like that. I feel like the Ed Clark. Now I understand why Ed Clark paints like that, because they saw more in themselves besides just an outside figure that was supposed to represent them. Now they can really feel what people in Africa feel and why they make art that is about the feeling of something. For instance, I had a big collector, Ray Glover, okay? He used to run TLC Beatrice when Reginald Lewis died. And they were buddies, that's why he started running it. He introduced him to his wife, like they're all like close. And he's this big guy, he lives in, he used to live in Chicago, and he would go to New York every week, so he would see all these historical artists, okay? Charles White's, Charles Austin's and all these people. So I met him and he said, come by the gallery, and I want you to have all your masters out. I said, okay, fine. So I had all the figurative pieces, all the master artists all lined up on the floor, or against the wall. And he's looking, he's like, I'll take that, all that. Just, that's how he's buying them, just pointing. And then his son says, do you have any Al Loving? And he looks at his son like, who is Al Loving, right? And he says, oh yeah, this artist. He said, how do you know about an artist named Al Loving? He said, the internet. I looked him up. He said, how'd you find that? I put black art, right? And it spoke to him. And I said, I just so happen to have another room in the gallery with an Al Loving exhibition. He said, Jumaane, you said that? I said, I swear, I didn't even know your son was coming. He comes back there, he sees all these movements and swirls and color, and now he's like, now I have to buy Now Loving because my kid saw this. So his kid could see the next feeling that you're trying to educate the older generation of collectors on, feeling and seeing themselves in the abstraction. We take the piece home. His daughter sits down, pulls out markers, he has a house full of faces. And there's nothing wrong with that. I got figurative art, that's fine. But when the piece came in, she starts sketching the piece so he could see how that was still him. That was still their culture.
Right.
And so it's really just a process, an opportunity to teach. Did I answer that?
You answered it very well.
Remember, as I mentioned, my first show was all abstract. And it wasn't like I didn't even know what I was really doing at the time. It just, as I fell into that. But what was really important is that, one, like I said, I showed you my first piece there. I didn't know that I loved it so much, okay? And also, talking with the artists, they can always explain something about it. Like, why do you get the little corner of a red in there? And they will go on and on why that little speck of red matters to that painting, okay? So you start developing your eye. Al Loving, Ed Clark, those two artists were very instrumental in me developing an eye. What happened is, when I first started, I would take art to your home and hang it on your wall while you thought about it. Okay, so my generation, there were so many of us that didn't have anything on their walls. And in Detroit, you had a large house with no walls, because our houses was affordable, and it was very nice. There were mansions other places. So what I would do, I'll take this big Ed Clark or Al Loving and put it on your wall, then you would tell me that you couldn't afford it. You're like, I don't have no $5,000, okay? Now, I would come and take it off your wall, and as soon as I take it down, they would see the void, which means you start seeing the void that was in your life. And then they say, put it back up, we gotta work something out. And then it became a joke, don't let him in your house. Because if you let him in your house, you're done. And so that's how it ended up growing, because I gave people a chance to look at it and feel it. Because a lot of times when we start talking about abstraction, really the abstraction is an African form of art. Like you said, the cloth, the kente cloth, even the sculptures. The sculptures are not done in the Western tradition of in someone's image. If the sculptures are done, and you see paying homage to a mother, it's like she would have the extended breasts and a child. That means you're paying homage to her. But you wouldn't have it where your face, because why? With the voodoo and hoodoo tradition, if you look like that doll, you're in trouble, right? So you never had that, so everything was kind of abstracted. But we never got credit for that. So Picasso got kind of credit for the Cubism, and then it rolled out from there. You see him sing, so that's where I think more and more we see it becomes that. Again, I always taught people, even when you have a figurative or representational work, it's very important to try to see it in the abstraction. You don't need to necessarily, it shouldn't have to be required, the narrative should not be a requirement for you to appreciate it. For a work, it has to be, you have to be able to see it as just a piece of art, which is form, shapes, and dimensions.
Good, great question. Anybody else have any questions?
Identify for us. Can you identify for us young emerging artists? And when I say something that's approachable and collectible for someone that's graduating from college, they don't have $5,000 for a picture. They don't have $5,000 for a piece of art. So is there anybody that, like my niece, she says, well, what did you see? What should I look at? Who should I follow?
Well, first of all, my father just said this fair, but this fair is the perfect place to find a really interesting piece of art. Part of it is not saying which artist is the hottest artist to get and this, that, and the other. I wouldn't get caught in that, not to saying you are, but don't get caught into, I got to get the hot this. You have to go to the environment, go to the places that you trust as an institution, whether it be a particular gallery you kind of trust what they provide, or a fair like this where you can say, no one just walked in here and threw a piece on the wall. It's been curated either by the galleries or by Mikhaile. So everything here matters, okay? Even if someone just did walk in and put it on the wall, I mean, it can still matter, but there's a process. So people have been working hard to show you the best of the best. So even if you never heard of the person, it's still somebody has worked hard their whole life to put this up on the wall today. So places like this is the perfect fair for that. I mean, you got pieces out here from $500 to $5,000 to $10,000, $20,000. It exists. I tell you, it's interesting because I was the first gallery to show Rasheed Johnson, and I had an intern. He was a high school kid about to graduate, and his mother comes to me and says, "What should I get him for his graduation gift?" And I said, "You should get him some art." She was like, "Yeah." I said, just get this piece by Rasheed, small piece, and that'll be a great gift. Trust me, you'll love it. Okay, so you know where that gift went, right? Okay, you see how that's grown, the gift that kept giving, right? So from that point, he's now, this guy is a partner at a major gallery in New York, in California. He was in that piece was in the not a retrospective, but an exhibition at the Museum of Contemporary Art for Rasheed Johnson. So, but at that time, I mean, I knew he was great, he was moving forward, but it was something that was very accessible to them. So for this, just kind of go out and see what looks cool, like what looks nice. Don't get too intellectual about it. You literally, because a lot of times people look at art when they first start collecting things and they want to get too intellectual. I mean, it's cool if you are intellectual, you like to get intellectual, but feel comfortable just liking that line. Ooh, that line, I like the way it just goes across the paper. Don't feel like you have to have a reason. So if you see some things over here that you don't know who the artist is, it's $500 and it has a cool line going across, get it. Mikhaile already made sure it's a cool artist. When you learn about him later, you'll say, "Oh, I'm glad I bought it for that line because look, it's so." But once you're in a safe place, you can do that. Like I'll tell people come to my gallery, I'm like, "Hey, you can just like that red dot. If that's what you like about it, that's cool." Because I know who this artist is. You're going to learn more about this artist, and eventually you're going to see a lot more than that red dot, and I know you're going to be happy that you got it. So this is really, you're in the perfect place. Yeah.
Hello. I'm really excited to have two generations of gallerists in a space. What's really been interesting to me and sort of challenging to me, I live in New Jersey. It's a neighborhood or area that's very concentrated with African American professionals, many of which take the pilgrimage to the vineyard, as you had mentioned before. And we were always in conversation about collecting. I'm in the art world, I collect. What I've noticed is that there's a generational gap in collecting. So the folks who had the means to do it between, let's say, the ages of 60 and 80, had the Al Lovings and Ed Clarks and Jacob Lawrences and really cultivated a collection. My generation, people who are 40 to 60, there's this gap of interest and commitment to collecting, and I really loved your strategy about putting things on the wall. But how do we cultivate that interest again? Because we need to support these artists. We need to buy the work we can. People have 3 houses and 75 pairs of expensive shoes, but balk at the opportunity to buy supported artwork at $5,000. So any strategies you'd like to share in addition to putting work on the wall?
Well, one, I think you have to say, how do you think that came about? And part of it, when you start talking about the 60 to 80 group or 60 to 75, that group is part of the baby boomers, okay? And the baby boomers were very political and cultural. So you did things more for purpose, as baby boomers. The following generation did things more commercially. They became more consumers, and you had more options. You know, I grew up, you had 3 television stations, and they all went off at 11 o'clock. I remember 11:45. And then you had this big signal on your TV. Nothing you were going to do about it. You know, FM radio didn't exist, okay? You know, we thought that was like a hoax. FM radio, who heard of that? You know, you had to have a big adapter, big as your car, to do it. But you had different changes. And part of it is the generation has not prioritized their own culture. You know, they made it important. It's not like we can't afford it. I never use that as the symbol, but it is, we do have to do that. Now, the methodology to change it, I'll let Jumaane tell you that.
Well, it's interesting because that hits on a lot of different points, okay? One thing, because see, even though I'm, quote, like young, I can't say young anymore, younger, I don't know. I'm young. My legs hurt, I've been dancing all week, but but I feel like I am personally 2 generations, like I've seen 2 generations of art because I just grew up in one with, it was like a collector and a business. And then right out of college, I've been doing this 21 years by myself. I mean, he was, you know, a state away, but, you know, he wasn't next to me, okay? So I've seen the change. So it's not necessarily they're not interested, because the people you know probably are interested. The thing about it is there's really no place to find the $5,000 piece. This is not normal, what we have going on here. Now, back in the day, we had National Black Fine Art Fair. People would come out there, maybe at first you didn't get it, or you went to the back and you just picked up a little something, and every year you were developing your eye or getting more comfortable and getting closer to purchasing or collecting something. Now, really a lot of the opportunities, because for people to collect the art don't exist. Because it's not that simple anymore to go in the gallery and say, I want to buy this piece, because who are you to buy this piece? Do you know about this artist already? I'm sorry, there's a list. I don't really need, no one really cares. A lot of the galleries have changed to the point now that the primary purpose is not educating you to understand the value of collecting art. When we talk about the National Black Fine Art Fair, we used to have a booth just sitting back. We knew we weren't going to sell anything. That wasn't our point. We just wanted to talk to everybody who walked in there, let them see something awesome on the wall, so one day they get older and say, oh my God, I should see that Howardina every day. But that's going to help them down the road. The whole point is education and teaching. And see, what we've lost is that we only got one small generation of collectors. We only got one. As soon as that second generation who came up, they may have had an uncle that had art, or maybe their parent had art, and they hadn't really gotten into it yet. They don't have the opportunity anymore, just because no one's taking the time to say, because collecting art is it's a lot. I mean, it's a major commitment. You know, so you need somebody who's going to sit by you and handhold you through that. I don't care, because I don't count people's money. So, I mean, some of my wealthiest collectors still buy the most inexpensive pieces because that's where their mind is right now. And we're just going to work through it. And eventually they're going to see something. They're going to say, I want it. And yes, I do have the means to get it. Or I have collectors who don't have much money, but they're like, hey, I'm going to send you that check every week. And we're going to do it. Go ahead. Say something.
No, I'm saying that's me.
Yeah, and that's fine. But they're both needed. They're both needed. And, but see, that collector on both spectrums doesn't get any. They don't get anything, because if you're the one who loves art and you're ready to pay a little bit at a time, no one wants that in the new system that's being created. Okay, and if you're the one with a lot of money and you don't know anything about art, you're not needed, because they're like, you can get it when it's really expensive because I know you got the money, but no point in putting you into the process. So it's really just the art world has changed, and it has kind of left the education, the cultural realm, and it's a lifestyle thing now that unfortunately we're not, you know, it's a lot to say about that. I'm just, yeah.
So that's the end of this panel. We really want to thank all of you for being here. If you stick around, we're going to begin our next panel in approximately 5 to 10 minutes.